Welcome to Stoughton Spotlight. I'm your host, Jeffrey Pickette. We're continuing our Conversations with the Candidates series, where I'll be sitting down with the residents who are running in races that are contested in this upcoming April town election. On this episode, I'm joined by one of the three candidates who will be running for Town Moderator, and I'm joined by Adam Dawkins. So Adam, thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
So Adam, you're new to the political scene and maybe not as well known in political circles as your two opponents. So
That's right.
just I'll start off by giving you a chance to introduce yourself and letting voters know who you are and why you decided to get into this race.
Sure. I moved to Stoughton in 2012. I'm still reasonably new to town. I came here from Washington, D.C., where I lived for 7 years. And when I was in Washington, it was a great big sort of impersonal city. And when my work brought me to Boston for a permanent move to Boston, I decided that I was really kind of done with living in the city. That I really wanted to live in a town that was more similar to my roots in South Carolina, where I grew up, in a town that was more similar to what I was used to as a younger person. And so I found Stoughton and fell in love with Stoughton and bought a house here and moved here and sort of jumped right in. I think it was within a couple of months that I was one of the founding board members of the Friends of the State Theater. I hooked up with John Stagnoni and got involved with the early fundraising efforts to bring back the State Theater, and that sort of was my entree into town affairs and getting involved in Stoughton, my new home. And from there, I sort of became more active online, as it were, and started Stoughton Enthusiasts, which sort of took off overnight, which now has almost 1,800 members, and a place that people can go and express all of the things that they love about Stoughton and all the things that they would love to do in order to improve Stoughton. And as I've talked to big game and Stoughton enthusiasts and expressed my enthusiasm for this town that I've come to love and call my home, I've decided that it's time for me to jump in and put my money where my mouth is, as it were, and get involved and try and do something that could really improve the town, I think, in a significant way. I got involved with town meeting earlier and am currently a town meeting member. But town moderator is a position that that I feel like I have a vision for, and I have a vision that relates to previous experience I've had in my life of running large meetings and running big sort of legislative bodies that I've done in the past back in my days in South Carolina, and so this feels like a very positive way and a very concrete way that I can get involved and do something really important and really really significant here in my new hometown.
So looking at town meeting, being a town meeting rep for the first time last year, what was something that you saw that town meeting does well and something that you would like to see town meeting do differently?
I think the thing I would say that town meeting does the best is actually the sort of town meeting as a form of government itself. And that is that of all the nights that I was at town meeting last year, I never left a meeting saying, boy, we just got that wrong. I feel like the experience of town meeting, of being in community and having the opportunity to get up and debate and discuss important issues and policy and budget items that face the town, and actually the good use of taxpayer dollars, I don't feel like we ever got anything wrong, so it really sort of solidifies my belief in town meeting as a form of government, as a real democratic, a true reflection of democratic government.
And so, what would you like to see though done differently? Town meeting now, having sat through one, what improvements would you make? I
think there are some very significant ways that we can make town meeting run more efficiently. And on a much more level playing field, and those are the things that I think that we can accomplish together. I've been involved and I'm quite good friends with a number of town meeting members, and we've gotten together offline since town meeting and talked about some ways that we can really make town meeting a much more efficient experience and a much more appropriate and decent use of people's time that they're putting into this, and run town meeting in such a way that's more level and more efficient.
Now, the last 2 years, the spring town meeting went 4 nights each. Both of those years, but in prior years, 10 nights, 7 nights, 8 nights, 11 nights. the 4 nights, obviously a significant decrease in the number of nights. A lot of other towns, though, still do it in 1 or 2 nights. Do you feel that Stoughton should continue to try to decrease the amount of nights needed for town meeting, or are you of the mindset that it's not really the number of nights, it's the efficiency within the meeting itself?
I think some years it's just going to be longer because there are more articles in the warrant. And I think that I think there's some things that we can do beforehand that will streamline that process, and I'd like to take a look at those with a working group of town meeting members as to how we can streamline. If we have a year when the warrant happens to be, I don't know, 75 articles or something like that, that's clearly going to take us quite some time to get through, then I think we should be looking at ways to streamline that process. But I think that the days of 10 and 11 nights of having a town meeting that goes on that long, I think those days should be well behind us now.
Now, the town meeting or town moderator job just isn't simply the 4 or so nights of town meeting itself. There's months and months of preparation. So if in the case you are elected and you serve as town moderator, what are you doing right now to kind of get yourself in position so that come May, you're ready to go?
Yeah, I'm getting really informed on parliamentary procedure, and I've run large meetings in the past using Robert's rules. Of course, town meeting time is sort of a derivation of Robert's rules. It came from that. I think we should look at we certainly think we should be looking at the rules of order that we use to run town meeting. But I'm getting myself much more acclimated with that once again, as it's been a few years since I've used it, but I'm quite comfortable using it. I'm also getting to know Mass General Law a bit more fully, and how it affects our lives with town meeting and the job of moderator, and making sure that the things that we do, that I understand. That I understand the sort of votes that are required for budget, the things that are required for policy, to make sure I'm familiar with all of those pieces, so that so there are no bumps in the road along the way.
Sure. Now, what type of moderator would you envision yourself as in terms of, like, at town meeting, running the meeting, and moving debate along, and how do you see yourself in that role?
I see myself as somebody who will always enforce the rules very fairly and across the board. And I also see myself as a moderator who will be someone who encourages people to speak, especially those who we've not heard from in some time. I think the tendency is the same people tend to get up and speak on every article, or most every article, and that there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to stifle somebody who's got something to say, but there are ways I think we can encourage new people to get up and speak. And express their ideas as well, because I think all of us are there because we have something to say, and we want to do something to move the town forward. I think people need to feel comfortable and feel invited to come forward and express those ideas. So that would be the sort of moderator I am. Someone who tries to pull those ideas out of people.
Now, in years past, especially the last few years, there's been trouble filling many of the town meeting spots, and there's up to 168 representatives across the 8 precincts, but in many years recently that hasn't been the case. What would you do as moderator to increase the number of people who serve as town meeting reps, to recruit, so to speak, for town meeting?
Yeah, so I think in my conversations with people around town, I have heard from people that the impression they have of town meeting now is that it's a total slog and it's a drag, and it's not something people want to be involved in, because 1, they don't really understand what it does, and 2, they've from what they've heard, it goes way too long and way too late, and it's sort of a free for all. I don't think it's a free for all. I do think it goes too long and too late occasionally. Nonetheless, I think there needs to be quite a lot of education around town about what town meeting is and why people should be involved. I like to think that social media, and maybe even Stoughton Enthusiasts, has played a role in the reason that there are so many people running for office this year. That it's now that we've given people a forum to get together, even in an online setting, a forum to get together to express their hopes and dreams and desires for Stoughton. I think people are now ready to sort of jump in and make that happen. I had a phone call just about 2 weeks ago, randomly on my cell phone. I was driving to my office, and my phone rings, and it was a gentleman by the name of Steve Cavey, who lives in Precinct 1, who called me, who found my number online on my campaign website, and gave me a call and said that he was interested in running for town meeting rep in Precinct 1, and that he had some ideas about that, and he was interested in sharing that with me, and we got together and had a beer at the House of Brews and talked about that. And he shared with me that he's interested in going door to door in his precinct as much as he can and covering as much ground as he can in Precinct 1 to hear from his neighbors and to hear from those possible future constituents of his what their priorities are for Stoughton. So that kind of listening and that kind of, and I think that kind of representation of the people's values and of our neighbors' values, I think is very attractive to people. And the more they can feel that town meeting is a place that we can get together and do very significant good things for Stoughton, I think the more people will get involved in it.
Sure, and you certainly have plenty of name recognition with Stoughton enthusiasts. But how do you, as running a campaign from a strategic standpoint, reach out to the groups that maybe aren't involved with social media, not on the Stoughton enthusiast page, and what's some strategy there in terms of being able to reach the voters?
Yeah, so I'm doing my own ground covering campaign and trying to get out and meet people and go door to door. I'm also doing an event coming up on March 4th at the Sons of Italy. I'm hoping to work with some friends to do an event also at one of the Portuguese clubs, particularly hopefully the PNC. I've been working with a broad range of people here in Stoughton to try and get my message out and try to get my name recognition out there as well, and involved with religious organizations here in town as well, and eager to have any opportunity I can to get in front of people.
Now, experience obviously is going to be a topic that comes up. How would you address the fact that just on paper, you have less experience than the other two people running for the position? Right.
Well, first of all, I would say that if you keep electing the same people, you keep getting the same results. My experience is a little different. I have, when I say that I've run large meetings before, this goes all the way back to high school for me, of running large sort of legislative bodies. But then, when I was in college at the University of South Carolina, I was president of the Student Senate. And had to weed through some pretty controversial issues as president of the Senate in those days, and the impeachment of a school treasurer and all sorts of different things that we had to deal with on a university basis. But I've in every community that I've been in and ever lived in, I've never been somebody that sits on my thumbs, and it's not easy to feel like you're part of a community when you live in a big city. But I came to Stoughton because I felt a sense of home here. And I'm somebody who's very focused on getting things done and very focused on trying to improve the place that I live, because I come from a town in South Carolina that went through a deep depression after the collapse of textile mills there in the early 80s. And had to rediscover itself, and had to rebuild itself, and had to decide who it wanted to be moving forward. And I've seen the effect of good, solid, visionary leadership on towns and cities. And I think that kind of leadership is needed here in Stoughton, because I think Stoughton's best days are ahead of us. I'm convinced of that, and I look forward to being part of it.
So what made the moderator the position to shoot for when it came time to, all right, now's a good time to get involved with politics?
Yeah, again, moderator is the position for which I have a vision. I didn't choose selectman because I think a selectman really needs to be somebody who has a different kind of set of vision than I do, and feels like they can affect change through that particular channel. My job if I'm elected as moderator is I think one of empowerment, and also one of demystification. The empowerment is to educate others on how the people in Stoughton have power to sort of take control of our own destiny as a town, and get together in this body called town meeting and affect real significant change. And demystification is that I think there are a lot of people out there who care very deeply about this town who aren't currently involved, and they just don't even know where to get started. And I think the moderator ought to be somebody who can be approachable and who is available and in certain forums that people can approach and reach out to and find out, to say, gee, I have an idea about something to do with downtown Stoughton, but I have no idea where to start with that. Can you help me? Yes, I can, and that's my job. And that's the sort of moderator I hope to be.
And what's unique about this compared to some of the other elected positions is the fact that it's only a one-year term.
That's right.
And so so much work, and you're running every year. So is this something you foresee yourself doing for some time if you are elected in April? Absolutely.
I'll do it until people get tired of me. I mean, I don't think that the job of moderator is like a Supreme Court appointment. It's not a lifetime appointment. But I will do this job for as long as I feel that I'm effective at it, and I will do this job as long as the people would like for me to do this job. I think there's a separate discussion to be had about whether or not 1 year is the right term for this job. But that's what our town charter says, and that's what we live with, and until we get to a place that we want to discuss changing that.
Well, is that something, while you brought it up, something that you feel maybe should be a longer term?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that affect the job of moderator that are spelled out in the town charter that probably need to be looked at and revisited, such as the fact that the moderator is the only elected official in town that gets a stipend. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think this ought to be a stipended position. I'm not running for this job because I want a stipend. I'm running for this job because I want to make a difference in the town that I live in and the town I love. And I've said in other settings that if I'm elected, I would refuse that stipend and ask that in the budget that it be reduced to $1 until we can get rid of it completely. But that would take an act of changing the charter. I think while we're at it, I think we ought to look at whether or not 1 year is right, because I think it becomes maybe a little. It might become a little bit of a diversion, I think, in the work of the moderator to constantly have to feel like they have to run every year. So maybe it's somebody that should be elected with the same term as a selectman, or maybe every 2 years or something like that, rather than every other year. But I'm concentrating right now on getting elected the first time, but we'll cross that bridge if we get to it.
Sure. Now, one of the roles of a moderator is to appoint members to the finance committee as well. They have some at-large appointments. So what would your vision be for somebody who should serve on the finance committee? How would you go about that process?
I think that, first of all, I think that with 9 appointments out of the 17 on FinCom, or the finance committee, I think that the moderator has a very weighted, maybe overly weighted appointment power for that. And I think we ought to maybe think about and look at whether 17 is the right size for our finance committee to begin with. And if that's the case, I think we ought to do a study of that and just sort of revisit whether that's the right size of a finance committee. Assuming for a moment that it's not, and we decide to bring that down to, say, I don't know, a finance committee of, say, 9, just throwing this out there as an idea, I think that the moderator ought to have 1 appointment, and maybe every precinct captain ought to have 1 appointment. That seems like a much more sort of level way of doing that. And because I think with 9 appointments out of the 17, I think there's opportunity for mischief. Now, I'm not suggesting there has been any mischief, but there's opportunity for that with such great appointment power. But I think that for as long as we're still living with 17 members and 9 appointments for the moderator, I would envision pulling together an ad hoc committee on appointments to assist the moderator in making those judgments. Because again, I don't think that should belong to one single person. Yes, the buck stops here, but I think that an ad hoc committee on nominations and applications like that for the moderator to consider and to help weed through those things, I think would be a much more democratic way of handling it.
And what's your thoughts on the information provided to town meeting members before town meeting? Sure, there's plenty of public forums that you can attend starting now in February all the way through March. But should there be maybe an information session to go over articles? Is there some way to better get the information out to members, so maybe to cut down the time of town meeting?
That's exactly one of the ideas I'd like to look at in order to streamline our actual town meeting process. I think a lot of our work could get done ahead of time if we had access to information. And if there were some sort of plenary sessions or something prior to the actual town meeting sessions to get some of the talking and get some of the debating over with in advance, and look at some of the recommendations that have been passed down by various town committees. I think there's a lot that could be accomplished if we had information sooner. I also think that there's some opportunity to make people a little more comfortable with how town meeting runs, and with our rules of order that would invite people to be a little more vocal at town meetings at times. And then again, I think also that we maybe want to talk about some things like the amount of time that we devote to every article, and how we can maybe put a little control around that. So I think there are all sorts of ways that we can do our homework ahead of time, and spend less time at town meeting itself.
Now, it's been, I would say, last couple of years, maybe it's 3, that there's been clicker voting at town meeting. What's your take on that?
I think it's fantastic. I think the smart use of technology is always a good thing, particularly in a 21st century world when we're using a form of government that we've had since Stoughton's beginnings. And I think we live with that form of government, and we use it wisely, and we implement 21st century technology to make that work for us. So I think it's great.
So in the last few minutes that we have, share some other ideas that you have for this position, and how you hope to be able to accomplish them.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I would really love to concentrate on as moderator is how we better prepare first-year people like myself last year, coming in as a first-year town meeting member. What is the experience of those people as they're being onboarded as a town meeting member for the first year? Mr. Hansen gave me a very, very helpful history lesson in town meeting. I think that it was maybe lacking a little bit in how town meeting itself runs, and what to expect when I get to town meeting itself. I think some sort of real conversation with people who have just come on board, or who are just coming on board, or maybe even interested in coming on board at town meeting, would be in order. I think a forum with the moderator would be useful, because I would like for people to have the opportunity to sort of say what it is that's brought them to town meeting in the first place. Everybody who's at town meeting is there because they want to make a difference in Stoughton. What's your vision for Stoughton, and how are we going to make that happen? And what are some ways that we can put your ideas into action? So that's I think a real priority for me, is inviting people to figure out for themselves, and with the right resources here in town, how we can put really good ideas to work here in Stoughton.
Sure. And do you have any procedural visions or goals that you would like to see carried out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of toying with a few things with a working group of town meeting members that I've been meeting with recently. We've been talking about one, using elements of Robert's Rules of Order, that because Robert's Rules of Order is more accessible in the public domain than town meeting time is. Town meeting time is not in the public domain. It is copyrighted. It's $25 a copy to get a hold of it, if you can get a hold of it. And right now it's not really something that everybody in town meeting has a copy of and has access to. And I can't just take a copy of that without breaking the law and make a Xerox of it and give it out to everybody. That would be illegal. Whereas with Robert's Rules of Order, I can download it from the internet and put it in the back of the warrant if we wanted to, or distribute it to everybody way in advance so they're more familiar with the Rules of Order. I also would like to look at whether or not it might be right for us to how we're presenting articles to begin with. I think that the person who is responsible for presenting it, be it a member of the Finance Committee, for instance, that somebody from the Finance Committee or a couple members of the Finance Committee should have time at the very beginning of the presentation of the article, as we take up the matter, to come up to the front, to the front podium, and make their case and present the article to town meeting, and then have, say, I don't know, 5 minutes for questions, for back and forth questions, and if we need to pull in other resources to that conversation to aid our understanding of that particular article, then I think that's appropriate. But to try to limit that to 5 minutes, with the opportunity that somebody could make a motion to extend that. And then I think we would have, I don't know, 4 minutes or 5 minutes of pro-con debate, where we divide that up evenly, and maybe one microphone on one side of the auditorium and another microphone on the other side of the auditorium, one for pros and one for cons. and divide that up so that people can have their say and make their opinions known. And then again, if that once we've run out of time, somebody certainly can make a motion to extend debate, and with a simple majority we can continue to do that. But I think there are some ways we can limit we can limit the amount of time we're spending on any particular article, and end up being much better stewards of everybody's time that they've put into being at town meeting, and get a whole lot more done in a smaller amount of time.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of the show that the Stoughton Enthusiasts page, perhaps spurred a few candidates to throw their hat in the race, and I guess just talk about maybe the testing the political waters and seeing if this group has political clout, in addition to just being a group that comes together on Facebook.
Right. I've tried to be very careful how I've talked about my own candidacy on that page, because I never started the Stoughton Enthusiast page for my own gain, and I'm not running for moderator. I feel like for my own gain either. I mean, I would like to be moderator because I feel like it's a job that I can do effectively and can make a difference for this town through this role. But I don't want anybody to think that I started Stoughton Enthusiast so that I could get elected somehow.
Sure.
So I've tried to be careful about how much I've talked about my own candidacy there. In terms of political clout, that's a great question. I don't know. I haven't given a lot of thought to that. As I said before, I don't know this for a fact, but I like to think that all the positive conversations that have gone on Stoughton Enthusiasts, and all the Stoughton love that people have shared on there, has encouraged people to step forward and try to make a difference. I know that's been a big part in making my own decision about this. I've gone on there and talked about all these things that could be and should be in Stoughton, and how much I love this town to begin with, and talking about it is one thing, and trying to do something about it is quite another.
Sure. And with 30 seconds left, you have a camera right there. Try to look at the voters and tell them why you would be the best choice for moderator.
I would be the best choice for moderator because I will always listen to you, and I will always have Stoughton's best intentions in mind. And I think together we can work to give Stoughton its best days are yet to come, and to give Stoughton the best possible, brightest future that we possibly can together. I think that our form of government is a great democracy here in this town, and it should be one that everybody has a chance at to make Stoughton a better place, and to bring your ideas to the table. So it's a great privilege to be part of such a form of government.
All right, well, Adam, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of Stoughton Spotlight. I'm Jeffrey Pickette. I'd like to thank Michael Hammond for directing, and just a reminder, the town election is in April, and there are 3 candidates running for Town Moderator, as well as other contested races. So once again, thank you for tuning in.